Talking to Cornelius. Conversation 10. So, the new system is progressing famously. The probationers are so highly delighted with the new rules and regulations that they've scarcely awaited their promulgation, but betaken themselves to the bush. In small parties of 8, 10, 12 and 14, rare news this for the secluded settler. We had a specimen at the last Supreme Court criminal sittings of the effect of the system upon a portion of the Jericho gang. 3 men were tried, convicted and condemned to die, 2 of whom were respited, to be probationed again, we suppose, and the 3rd was executed not many days ago. At the Jerusalem gang, matters are carried on upon a more extended scale. A day or 2 ago, 14 men belonging to this party absconded, and by this time probably news will have reached headquarters of the sacking of some settler's domicile, if not the cracking of his head. May we ask, not how many pounds, but how many hundreds of pounds it has cost the government for the capture of bolters from the Jerusalem gang alone within these 2 or 3 months? We want no shirking of the question, but a plain, straightforward, intelligible answer. Has the government any scribe who will dare to give it to the public? We've heard a good deal from those who are anxious to bolster up this new-fangled system and who for that purpose use every method of hoodwinking the public, of the vast wonders that are about to be performed at Bridgewater in the extension of the causeway by the augmentation of the gang. Verily, a curious method has been adopted to carry this great work into effect. The new superintendent, an officer of the 96th Regiment, fired with an ardour known only to military men, marshals and, we believe, exercises his men, the probation gentlemen, a la militaire, with "Attention! Eyes right! Stand at ease!" and all the rest of it. Work is a third-rate consideration altogether with this zealous officer, who by all account is quite a little Bonaparte in his way. Military exercise first, then morals, and lastly, work. These are the points to be attended to at Bridgewater, and in the rotation we have stated. It is impossible not to perceive that the probation system is fraught with an immensity of evil. As a means of punishment, it is ineffectual, while as regards reformation it is worse than useless, and yet, with a scarcity of labour almost unparalleled, and no prospect of any efficient aid arriving in time for the ensuing harvest, this mild scheme is recklessly persevered in, and at an expense immeasurably disproportionate to any benefit that might accrue from the men's labour. And what, after all, can be the cause of this wholesale absconding? Not one cause, we suspect, but several. The herding together of men in gangs without proper control, moral or physical, the distant prospect of any alleviation of punishment, and, as we have heard, insufficient food. These, perchance, are the principal causes. If the system is to be worked beneficially, a great alteration must take place, and that, too, before the evil shall have increased beyond the reach of speedy eradication. Editorial. Colonial Times, 24th of August, 1841. I know you'd rather I didn't dig into the business of the probation system, old man. In your elderly years, you presented yourself to the world as just another Irish immigrant, a proud Antrim boy who'd come to the new world in hope of a better life. You certainly weren't the only one on the island to bury a convict past. Keeping things dead and buried was a cultural imperative passed down through our generations. But here's the thing, old man. Your time in the probation system was the first chapter of your colonial life. It was the setting for your first experiences as a late teenage man of what it meant to be in Australia. It was where you learnt certain skills and probably where you started new friendships. But all of those experiences were pressed inside an institutional box as you moved between crowded cells and locked doors and the endless shuffling queues to get a feed and the awesome spaciousness of the bush. As you heard the familiar patter of accents like your own, suddenly punctuated by the raucous sound of the island's strange bird life. And as you heard stories about the strange nature of this place, that the nearby stream, Wallaby Rivulet, was populated by creatures that were something like a cross between a water rat and a duck. The first thing I know about the probation system is that it looked logical and reasonable on paper. The central idea, in line with McConaughey's insights and the views of those people back in England who considered themselves experts in penitentiary sciences, was to jettison the assignment system. The old business of sending individuals off to some property owner's temporary slavery, in the language of McConaughey, was done and dusted. The new probation system was designed to encourage and reward good behaviour through processes and structures designed to deal with 200 to 300 men per station. Essentially, if you worked hard and behaved well, then you were given an easier run towards gaining your ticket of leave and ultimate freedom. When a convict ship arrived in Hobart, the convicts landed. They were usually inspected by the Lieutenant Governor. Reports were given, paperwork was signed. Then the convicts were divided into allocated groups and sent off to the various probation stations around the island. By 1844, there were stations at Anson, Anthill Ponds, Baghdad, Hobart Town, Brickfields, Bridgewater, Broadmarsh, Browns River, Buckland, Campbelltown, a place called Cascades but on the Tasman Peninsula, Cleveland, Coal Mines, Darlington, Deloraine, Dunerne, Fingal, Flinders Bay, Glenorchy, Impression Bay, Jericho, Jerusalem, Kerry's Lodge, Longmarsh, Lovely Bank, 7 Mile Creek, New Norfolk, Oyster Cove, Parsons Pass, Perth, Picton, Port Esperance, Pontville, Point Pure, Ross, Rocky Hill, Saltwater River, Slopen Island, Southport, St Mary's Pass, Victoria Valley, Wedge Bay and Westbury. The probation system rolled out fast. It was implemented in 1841. By 1844, new stations were spread thick over the entire eastern half of the island. Large groups of convicts were in everybody's backyards, and there weren't many free settlers who were happy about it. In the journey from Hobart to Launceston, for example, you would pass at least 6 probation stations, 6 centres of mass incarceration, and that's not including the prison gangs you'd see at work within those 2 main townships. And here's the thing, there had to be a quick supply of these new probation stations because the powers that be in England put an end to transportation to New South Wales in 1840. So, Van Diemen's Land had suddenly become the one-stop destination for anyone in the Empire sentenced to transportation. The island was hit by successive waves of incoming convicts as soon as the northern colony closed its doors. 13,587 convicts arrived between the start of 1842 and the end of 1844. The overall population of the island at the time was around about 60,000 people. So, those convict arrivals, the 13,587, equated to a 23% increase in the colony's population, and all of that in the space of 3 years. 3 years. For many free settlers, this dramatic turn of events was nothing short of horrifying. I came out with my husband and 2 children and left a comfortable home in England where I once had servants of my own, to seek for my family the advantages which the government led us to expect here. But we have met with nothing but poverty and disappointment. My husband has been unable to get employment in the line in which he was bred, but of necessity he was obliged to accept of the humblest employment to keep his family from starving. And even in that he cannot now find employment, because probation men, who have a home provided for them by the government, when by bad conduct or laziness they're thrown out of employment, will do the work at less wages than the masters could for shame offer to a decent man of good character with a helpless family, who when thrown out of work has no resource but to starve or steal, unless, as in my case, he's supported by his wife's labour. A washerwoman's letter to the editor. The True Colonist, Hobart, 5th of January, 1844. I find it interesting to remember, old man, that you and certainly a number of my other first arriving ancestors were all part of an unwelcome tsunami of untrustworthy criminal new arrivals who, as far as people like a washerwoman were concerned, were being looked after a bit too generously by the probation-loving government. And these boatloads of criminal lowlives were stealing jobs from good honest people, decent people. And were those good honest people getting their fair share from the government? Oh no, of course not. They were left to struggle, weren't they? A washerwoman was letting rip with one of the oldest numbers in the modern Australian songbook, the anti-immigration song sung with a xenophobic fervour. Usually, we start the story of the anti-immigration movement with the atrocities committed towards the Chinese on the Victorian goldfields. But I think the story has its beginning in the views of people like a washerwoman and a growing and increasingly organised movement that came to be known as the Anti-Transportation League.